Mod Farmer. I am Charlie, the Disruptor Charlie. I don't know how to say the last name, but we're rolling with it. We are going to get into maybe some arguments, maybe some debates. Who knows? Going to get into some marketing talk right after a quick word from our sponsors. What's up, everybody? This is John and Casey from ModCom, and I have to show you something. All right, this tool is called Wicked Reports. It's one of the best attribution tools I've ever seen because of this feature called Funnel Vision. It breaks up your ROAS into top, middle, and bottom of funnel. So I'm here in my Facebook ads account and checking out this campaign, V-Day Sale. I'd probably be cutting this thing, right? If I was looking in Ads Manager or if I was looking at first touch attribution, I'd be like, you suck, 0.18 ROAS. You're out. But if I look at it middle funnel, it's like one of the best closers. If I look at it bottom of funnel, it's one of the best closers. So that campaign is closing. I got to keep it running. I got to adjust the targeting in there, and I got to adjust the creative in there. You know what I'm saying, Casey?
John, if you look at the top campaign here, this 4-pack lob rolls, you can see actually the exact opposite effect. It's bringing people into the account, into this world really effectively, but it's not that closing type. So you kind of need a little bit of both, right? Like this is the Kobe. Close. One you described as the Shack. Together, they make beautiful harmony in your ad account.
Yeah, that one's lobbing it up. The other one's throwing it down. If you want to find out which of your campaigns are Kobe's, which ones are Shacks, and which ones you should just cut entirely, don't even give them a roster spot, go to wickedreports.com and click the Book a Demo button. And we are back. Charlie, it is good to have you here. I feel like already you're just ready to argue with me about our ad read and everything. But before we get into that, give people a little bit of a background on you. And tell me, so one thing I have trying to be asking every guest lately is tell me how you make money.
Yeah, I think the way that I make money more than anything else is by helping people make success easier. I make the easy and really help people see more success and less stress from my experience, having driven over $1 billion in revenue. And I've got students in 6 continents, nobody in Antarctica yet, but maybe soon, maybe after this pod, we'll get somebody. Yeah. And that's really the bulk of what I do is I basically help other people create opportunities and find the success that they deserve.
Right. So specifically, I mean, give a little plug for your products really quick, or your product. Go to.
Yeah. I mean, my number one thing is I run a business called Disruptor School, where you can learn from me and a lot of other experts in the space on learning business development, Facebook ads, digital marketing, all the things that you need to gain the independence to really kind of chase what you're trying to do. And so there's a lot of deep dives in there, a lot of fun things. I won't get too deep into it, but yeah, if everything else isn't working out for you and you want to take control of yourself so you never have to pay anybody else ever again, there's a solution for that. And that's what I'm here for.
Oh, what an interesting segue because of what we're talking about today with agency. But before we get into that, again, my kind of whole shtick on this show is like, you know, the unpopular truths, which we'll get into your unpopular truth in a minute. I know that's like all you have. I don't think you have any popular opinions.
Somebody called me like, if I wanted to be the villain, I could. Somebody told me that yesterday in a text message. I'm like, am I really the villain? I feel way more like Katniss.
I think wow. That's what you feel. I think you're definitely... you're like a Gale, you know what I mean? Like controversial, like you're like, I'm not afraid to do what needs to be done, you know?
Sure. I'll speak truth to power all day.
Yeah. So I would say, so before we get into that though, tell me like the biggest misuse of your products or services, or just somebody who like isn't really a good fit.
Yeah. I think the biggest misuses is when people come to learn from me, and ultimately they expect for that to be a way to validate their line of thinking that got them there. I think the biggest opportunity we have is to change the way that people think so that they can change the way that they work and ultimately get their time back and work on the business instead of in the business. And changing that list of priorities in people's heads is often the most difficult spot. And the people that come in to basically have me say that they were right all along, well, it's like going to a couples counselor so that they can yell at your spouse. Like, that's just not productive.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So before we get too into it too, if you guys are watching on the live stream, either on YouTube, LinkedIn, or on the Twitter space, If you have questions for myself or Charlie throughout the episode, drop them into the comments or the chat, wherever you're watching. We will get to them at the end. I'm going to try and get a cleanly recorded episode so we can upload it to the podcasting apps. All right, next little segment I like to do. Tell me an unpopular opinion you have about business. Or, I mean, you can go for, I like to say an unpopular truth, right? Like, it's like, this isn't really an opinion. Like, this is just something that, like, really nobody else wants to tell you. And I know you got a lot of these. So hit me with your best one.
I mean, I'll cap it off with, I think the reason that most people aren't nearly as successful as they want to be is because they value the wrong metrics. They ask the wrong questions and ultimately define success in a way that holds them back. And almost every problem that I run into with somebody is where they were successful because of something that they were good at, but ultimately the reason they can't get bigger is because of one of those issues. Now, it might be they value silly things like targeting or ROAS or MER, or they might be focusing on other like obnoxious things like pushing their attribution models and trying to change all sorts of other stuff. They might be, focused on LTV when their biggest issue is a second purchase rate or customer retention. I think people are just so myopically focused on whatever screenshot somebody put up out of context that is doing better than them, comparing themselves to other people's outsides. So I think that's the biggest pain point in coming in is just people are, again, asking the wrong questions, valuing the wrong metrics, and defining success in a way that ultimately inhibits their potential.
Tell me about your background with, tell me a little bit about your background with drugs.
So I was a touring musician and radio personality and addict for about 10 years, basically summer after high school for about a decade. And it got as bad as regular everyday intravenous heroin user. I smoked a lot of meth, did a lot of things there. It's easy for me to list off the things that I didn't do than it is for me to list off the things that I did do. And I think I got a lot of skills and life lessons from all of that. And I've tried to turn those into positives. And I mean, hey, look, we're in digital marketing.
Yeah.
Convincing absolute strangers to give you their money is at the core of what we do. And if there's one thing that a good self-respecting junkie can handle, it's that. So I got a lot of life experience. And, but yeah, so I now have 11 years clean and sober from that stuff. Don't drink, don't smoke, eat way too much sugar. But,
if that's the biggest vice, then I think that.
Yeah, that's pretty much my vices these days. Food, because I can eat.
How did you get into it?
Acceptance from others.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't cool. The cool people did things. I had a little bit more money than the other folks did because I was like working jobs and I was hustling even at like, in T-Ball, I was the #1 candy bar salesman. And so I got a free Huffy every year. And I like, no matter what it was, I always had the hustle, always had the grind, always had that like thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So summer after high school, I was hanging out with friends and, I could be the guy that would get the 12-pack, get the bottle, get the bag, whatever. And as that grew, I knew that, hey, if I showed up with something to give everybody, people would like me at a very surface level, but I was a really insecure person nobody liked anyway. So that grew into physical dependency and identity issues. And I basically just covered all the things that were wrong with me by trying to fix it and all the other parts of other people. And, that leaves you extraordinarily empty. And, but for what it's worth, was effective for me to kind of figure out a pathway. Now, not a good one, but I definitely developed an identity where I hadn't had one before.
What so tell me about the identity that you developed. You got into this whole thing really because you had a hard time like with acceptance with people, didn't have friends, and that's important at that age. And I think that, as adults, sometimes we age into it being a little less important to us. Like we kind of care less what other people think as we get a little older, or we get a tight circle of people who like, I only care what you think. Like, I don't care what everyone else thinks type of thing. But like, that seems like the self-work that you would have to do to get past that. So, I mean, tell me about that. Like, did you just have to get to a point where you're just like, I don't need to be accepted if it means being
No, I mean, I gave up because my girlfriend that I was living with went to rehab and basically abandoned me.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dealer wouldn't let me do drugs at his house anymore because apparently I was buying too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shaking so bad from like DTs that I couldn't shoot myself up anymore. And my options are basically jails, institutions, or death. And I gave up, but it took a decade of that where, I mean, I owned a 5-bedroom house. I bought it with my student loan money in college.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I wasn't even welcome in my home with people that weren't paying rent. And I was like breaking into my own house. I gotten maybe a dozen DUIs because in Florida, it's like a fine. Like they don't like, it's not like California where it like matters. And, you know, so those things all piled up, you know what I mean? But that's kind of at some point what gets you to where you are. Right. And some people decide to go other routes, but so I'm like a fucking cockroach, man. I mean,
yeah. So what happened? So tell me a little bit about because you just did a video about this on YouTube. So I'm kind of plugging that. So if you check out Charlie's YouTube, which is at CT Disruptor, right?
Yeah.
He has a video about this, but give me the quick rundown on how you, I mean, at some point, like you could not like physically even do drugs anymore, like without having someone else who would shoot you up. So
and then that person wouldn't do it anymore because apparently I was buying too many drugs at his dad's house.
Right. And so then it's like, what does too many drugs even mean?
I mean, bro, I get it. This is enough for 3 people, but I have a habit. So like, don't judge me. You're the dude selling me.
You're selling it to me.
Let's not get on a fucking high horse here.
Yeah. So you just, I mean, you go to rehab. What put you on this career path of running ads for people? And like, why is that? Like, do you think it is? So to me, I mean, this is a world where it's just very much like there's a thrill. I mean, like I remember the first time I ran a campaign and like I spent some money, you know, I spent $100, $500, something like that. And then like something happened because of it. Like, we made $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that. Or we got like all of these. For me, it was like I was running a local retail store and we spent a few $100 and we got like so many people to this live event at our store. And we did like 10 or 15 grand in sales that day. So the ROI on it was insane, but it's a little bit different when you're doing like get them to an event and you can bake them a little bit better with a retail store. But yeah, like I mean, I remember that like that's almost like there's like a little hit there of dopamine. I think maybe not to the degree as heroin, the same degree as heroin, but
probably not. But it's not terribly dissimilar. Like I mean, you're filling the parts of you with stuff. Yeah,
right. It was. I think it gives you the self-worth, right? Like because you were looking for your own identity and self-worth in something else, right?
Yeah.
And then you gave that up, but that didn't mean that you didn't still have that hole you're trying to fill.
Exactly.
And so then you learn like, oh, I can do this other thing. Like I can make rain. Like once you realize like I can make rain, that starts to give you self-worth as well. And I think, you know, back to your point earlier about, you know, kind of your unpopular opinion that there's just a lot of people out there that give, you know, poor advice or advice that like they just have egos. It's because of that, right? It's because they've created this self-worth that like I'm a rainmaker. I can make rain. I've made rain before. I've made campaigns that make money before. So like it's very hard to kind of like swallow that and say like, but I'm not able to do it anymore, because it's not just a matter of like, oh, let me, you know, have no ego and be humble and learn. It's more of like, this is my identity. This is the way I've self-identified myself. Right. And so I mean, I think that all that to say that I think that it's a it is a relatively natural career path. There's probably other ones as well. But yeah, I mean,
ultimately there's some juice to it. It's exciting. Like, I mean, I combined a lot of what I would consider like commodity skills over the course of my life to that point. Yeah. I was able to combine them into some sort of undeniable value. And I also put myself in situations where like, I mean, I got my first gig in social media. It was my first real day job. I was like 29 years old, $10 an hour data entry at some agency. I got fired within 3 months. I took their biggest client with me. I started another agency. We won the pitch on AMC, got fired from that job, even though I started the company because my vice president was like also was the attorney that wrote the contract, and basically was like, as soon as we got 100 flowers to sign on the dotted line, I was no longer an employee. And then got a job running paid ads for like Jamba Juice and stuff because I was running stuff for my own band after a guy fired me because he put $100 into Facebook. So I started putting my credit card into Facebook and running things. 6 months later, I was filling up like Comic-Con speaking events for Jay and Silent Bob. 9 months later, I was running $1 million a day for like CBS and Nissan. And I got to the point where I could make a show win sweeps. I could sell out. I could book every day, morning till night at car dealerships to do test drives of a car that hadn't come out yet. I could make a video game the #1 title in the country. Like I had direct control. And when you're spending 7 figures a day, like you see the impact of that stuff pretty quickly. And I was also a really bad employee. Like I was constantly running case studies where they wouldn't allowed, and I was sharing it in a way that was frowned upon heavy in that establishment. And I got fired from agency and agency and agency. But as a result, I got to learn from the smartest people in the room from like a dozen different rooms. And that's kind of gave me a great perspective on why I was a bad employee at the agencies, why I was good on the brand side, and ultimately why a lot of the service providing roles that people take running ads for people was ultimately not simpatico with the end results of that business. Like, the first time I got fired from a major agency, I got written up and fired basically because I was saving the client $200,000 a day in media spend and over delivering on the ask, which sounds like a good thing, except when you understand that we had a commission of 20% on ad spend. So I effectively cost 3 or 4 times my annual salary in a week.
Yeah, right. Yes. So and that's what I want to get into. I want to get into agencies and something I tweeted a little while back. That got me some heat. I felt like you for a day. It got me some heat.
It was good.
It was good. Good to feel like Charlie for a day. That's about all of it I can handle.
Don't take more than that. Not suggested too many. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it got some heat before, and essentially what I said was, what was the exact words I said? I think I said something along the lines of, you and your agency's incentives will never be fully aligned. At best, it can work for a little while. Now, I want to get into that because you actually disagreed with me, which I was like, okay, I expected a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I loved it because I thought like you were expecting me to come in like with a like fully backing you up, and
yeah, you're like. Yeah, I think you were like, hey, good job bringing some smoke. Yeah, you're like, good job bringing some smoke, but I don't agree. So I do want to get into that. But first, I want to close this out, and I want to say, you kind of had this thing where your self-identity was, being the kid who could bring the bag, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you got into drugs. And you got out of that and you got into this self-identity of like, I'm the guy who can make rain. I can make your video game #1. I can sell out I can sell out concert tickets. I can sell out an event. What's your self-identity now?
I think my self-identity now, if what I hope it is the guy that after a long time of being in this industry is maybe one of the first people that is actually honest with others, with a path that simplifies work so they can be more successful. I mean, honestly, my biggest hope is I went from having to worry about my money being food, drugs, or like gas in my car to I'm going to buy a place in Chelsea in 2 months. I already bought a house in LA. Like, I'm providing opportunity in a way where literally anybody else can do it. But I see so many people suffer at the hands of these agencies and these bad advice that if I can be the person that comes in and takes that person from a place of stress and uncertainty to success and providing opportunity, that lets me put my head down on the pillow at the end of the day in a great place. So if I can ultimately be a conduit to provide more opportunity and joy and like confidence and success for people, then I'm giving back with my like living amends in a way where every single day I'm making the world a little bit a better place.
Yeah.
By teaching people from the literally hundreds of millions of dollars of mistakes that I've made. And somebody should do that.
So tell me why you disagree with me that the agency model will never fully be aligned with the client's revenue model, or my statement was your agency will never be fully aligned with you. At best, it will work for a short period of time. Tell me why you disagree with that statement.
I think it goes down to the contracts. I think the average agency contract looks like one of three things. First, it's commission on ad spend with a retainer, which objectively means my job as an agency has nothing to do with your success as a company. It's how much credit for everybody else's work can I take so that you look good to your boss, so that I can get a bigger check, so that I can make a bigger commission for my boss. My job is to make the person that hired me look good to the person that writes the check. Nothing to do with success of the business. And to be fair, that also leans into part number two, which is if it is working, but not growing fast enough, it's now not a good investment for the agency to give you the best quality help. Because we have you. Now I've got 5 other clients that want to come in. If I bring in 5 more clients, my billings as an agency is going to go up. But if I give them the low rent talent, we're not going to do as well. So as soon as I get you into that second contract, okay, you did the 90-day, great. We're going to sign on for 6 months. Here's your new account manager. Because it's not cost effective for me to put my best work on somebody else where I'm not going to make more money. Mm-hmm. So as an investment banker, I don't want to put my assets in retaining a relationship where I'm not going to see more increasing value. So you have that issue. And then I think the third side of it is most agencies are not sophisticated enough in their understanding of financials to legitimately point to their incremental impact on the business. And so they focus on performance incentives. But a performance incentive has nothing to do with success of the company. It has everything to do with what can I do to look good? And if the company grows, great. But like you're talking about, I can make rain. I would say, I know, I'll try to be nicer because Nick was texting me. He's like, bro, you can't talk like this and then get on, like, do things. So like the Anil Shackelford inside my head, just trying to be a little bit, oh, look at who just popped in. Nick, as I said,
Shackelford, we were just talking about him.
Quite literally, it was just like, Nick, you can't be talking like this. So let me try to phrase it another way. Nick, it's funny. I literally just edited myself based on our messages. And then you pop in like, man, ears are burning. I love it. I will say this. I think there are a lot of people, to use the analogy you used earlier, John, about people that can make it rain. I think there's a lot of folks that were dancing so long that ultimately what they did well was be around when it rained. And there's a lot of folks that ultimately their claim to fame as a quote unquote rainmaker is their ability to sign the client that is successful.
Their ability to see that there's a rainstorm coming anyway.
Sure.
And get in with that client, you know, that it's like, hey, it's going to rain for them anyway. If I get in right here, it's going to seem like I made it rain.
Yeah. You know, and to that point, oh, I guess it was muted on this thing. No, we're on. Okay.
You've been muted.
Oh,
you've been muted this whole time.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. Oh, well. Anyway.
I just realized actually, but you're good.
Okay. Well, there we go. My bad. I don't know what's going on with that. Anyway, point being, interesting. So what was Nick listening to the last 5 minutes? Who knows?
Yeah. Sure.
Love you, Nick. My point here is that I think I've been in a situation where I've been attached to brands that were successful, whether or not I was there. And I think there are a lot of brands that don't need paid social to be successful, but they need somebody to handle the paid social. To be fair, as a paid social guy, I've hired email marketers. Like one of our friends is one of the people that I've hired for Under Outfit.
Yeah.
And do I know if that person is the best in the world? No. Do I have confidence they're going to do the job as they describe? Yeah. And I just need an executor. And sometimes that's okay.
Right. So that's essentially where you disagree with my statement that your client incentives and agency incentives will never be fully aligned. That's why you disagree, because in some cases, the agency literally is just there to be an executor, and it's like, we're paying you X for Y deliverable or service, and and so like it's a good relationship. And my point is, yeah, that's a good relationship. That works for a time. That's exactly what I meant. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying don't use agencies. I'm not saying agencies can't be helpful or useful, or in some cases, in many cases, a better option than trying to do something yourself that you don't know how to do. What I'm saying is that the agency incentivization model is not aligned with the client incentivization model. So even if you're hiring an email agency, they're not incentivized, if you own the brand, the same way you are. They're not incentivized to grow the brand or to grow the contribution margin or to grow. They're incentivized to execute what you've paid them to execute as efficiently as possible. By as efficiently as possible, I mean with as little human resource dedicated as possible to give you to do the job that the way that they've said that they're going to do it. So that's my point. Is that I
mean, I agree with that, but I also think there's another way of running your contracts, and ways that I've done it when I was building agencies. Like I built several 7-figure agencies over the years.
Yeah, specifically as a paid media agency.
Specifically as a paid media agency, what I did was I constructed my contracts differently.
Okay.
And I did a great interview with this woman, Cynthia Sandoval, at the Whaleys. And here's the contract construction: is I'm taking a flat fee. Mm-hmm. I'm not taking a commission on ad spend. I have no performance incentive, but my flat fee is going up on a consistent cadence. Let's say, for instance, I'm charging you, for the purpose of this conversation, $2,000. And every 3 months, I'm going to raise that rate by $500. Mm-hmm. My job in that scenario is to have you be like, oh, it's only $500. That's great. Mm-hmm. Because I can prove my value. Now, we could also say this is 10 grand. I'm going to raise it by $1,000 a month. Like, I mean, it's relative. I'm just throwing a number out there. It doesn't really matter, because not everybody listening can get the $50,000 a month, $10,000 a month, even $5,000 a month contracts. Like, so let's just say it's relative. But my job is to basically make it so that when that bill goes up, you're stoked. Because really, my job as a paid media person has nothing to do with spend your X money at X ROAS. Like, that is nothing to do with success. Mm-hmm. My job is to especially in paid social, is make the amplification of your business model something that you don't need to worry about, so that your business grows, so that when my billings go up, you don't think twice about it. And I've done that over and over again, where from the agency side, you massively scale revenue without scaling workload. And from the client side, those costs are known. And there's no bill at the end of the month, and there's no conflict around like ad spend. And I don't care about attribution or credit or anything. Like, what's my ROAS? I don't care. Did us working together net positive for your business? Are you making more money now than when we started? Am I the reason that there's a struggle in your business? If not, I'm going to go along with you. Okay. And I'm taking that to easily 5 or 10x billings over several years for agencies.
So and then how much effort then are you putting into that? Like if it's like, hey, our initial rate is $2,000 per month, or $3,000 per month. Let's say $3,000 per month for 3 months, and then it's going to go up by $500 per month. Until it hits, I don't know if you put caps on this or if it's just forever.
It's basically forever, right? Because
so it could go up to 50 grand, right? It could go up
not
to
a problem. Here's why.
60 grand. But hold on, listen, before you get into it, like it could go up to 50 or 60 grand. How much are you putting, how much like resource are you putting into it on a month-to-month basis, 18 months in, 24 months in?
I mean, if you're doing your job, less and less resources each week.
So
like
then,
your job right.
So then me,
something that should take an hour or two a week max.
So then me as a brand owner, like if I start to get to where I'm paying you $20,000, $25,000 a month, and it's taking less and less resource from you every week, and it's pretty clear like what the resource is. It's like, oh, you're putting new creatives into there, and you're telling me how you're breaking down what creatives you're putting into there. Wouldn't the right thing for me to do, like the smart business decision, to be like, I should hire that in-house instead of paying, $500,000 a year at some point to someone else to do it. And I could hire a pretty high level person in-house to do it. Maybe even a person who's been trained by this person.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the wrong thing to do, but it goes to the point of your job when you're hired as a paid media person. Say it's paid social. For the purpose of this conversation, running Facebook ads as an agency, for this example. My job isn't to spend X money at X ROAS. My job is to help the business grow. So like, if the question is, well, right now we're spending $2,000 a day. Why isn't it $3,000? Mm-hmm. What's wrong in the business? I'm actually I'm installing myself effectively as CMO day one of you bringing me on to run your ads, because it is in my best interest to figure out why the ad spend isn't more. Like when I used to run bigger agencies, the first page of the report wasn't this is how much we spent in the return. It was like, say it's $1 million. This is what we could have done with 5. Second page, this is what we could have done with 2. Third page, this is what we did with $1 million. How much more money do you not want to make next year or next month or next quarter, next term? So, and they say, well, we can't spend that much because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, let's go fix that. Like, just because your execution in the platform is only a couple hours, it doesn't mean that your responsibility in trying to figure out how to grow the business doesn't actually require more time. It's that the platform execution is 3% of the job. And to that point, my investment in the business and the clients executionally in pushing buttons.
And to be fair, I didn't ask you how much resource you're putting into running the platform. I asked you how much resource are you putting in.
Okay, fair enough. So I may have misunderstood that. So yeah, to that point, I'm hopefully putting in less over time. Like if I'm doing my job right, but there are also going to be times where we have to work harder. There are times where we don't have to work as much, right? Like if it's the middle of February and CPMs are fantastic, maybe you don't have to work nearly as hard as like the middle of April when everybody's saying, oh, the world is over, but it's like it happens the same thing every single year. Like there are things to this. And to be fair, if you're good at your job as a manager, your employees and the systems you build should operate better and better, even without you. And to be fair, if it graduates to where you don't need me, that's great. That's success. And if I end up losing a client because ultimately they don't need me after we've gone from 10,000 to 50, the work that I've done there has easily brought me in other opportunities.
And so Shaq's on the Twitter space right now. We've talked about this before where we have had clients for multiple years, and it was like, and we can in a very real way, not say like, oh, we weren't just there when it rained. Like it rained because of us, right? Like this business had these pivotal moments because of like, whether it was in ad account or whether it was just our input or whether it was like, we should rework our offer, we should rework our product mix, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Our input led to some step growth in the business. This has happened. And then sometimes the client gets to a point where they move on. Like it honestly, because of how much they're paying us now, it makes sense for them to hire that in-house. It's like, if I'm going to pay, you, Charlie, whoever, my agency, $500,000 a year. And what they're doing is they're essentially acting as my, like, my outsourced CMO. It's like, well, okay, but now you're paying them $500,000 a year. And you know what you can actually afford is a
real CMO,
a real in-house CMO. And that is all I'm saying. Okay. So again, I'm not saying don't use agencies. I'm not saying the relationship can't work for a time. It totally can. And like I grew an agency, I built an agency, I sold it. And then I ran Performance for Structured. And like, I love the agency world. All I'm saying is that by definition makes it so that the agency is not aligned from an incentive standpoint, because as people, when that would happen, we would feel like, hey, you know, like it's a little bittersweet, right? Because it's like, okay, well, they're not going to be with us anymore, but like I almost feel like they graduated, right? So like there's that sweet side to it too. But like I mean, if you're just looking at your agency business on a spreadsheet, it's all better. It's not like you know, you lost a whole lot off of your top line, you know, and probably some off of your bottom line as well. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm totally saying like the best agencies, the most moral agencies do it like that, right? Sure. And they acknowledge that at some point you're going to move on, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's just, you know, not an aligned incentive model. Now, you know, if you get to a point, some agencies try and do this thing where it's like they're going to take an equity piece of the business. And I've even heard you say that before, like, you know, I'll run your marketing department for an equity piece of the business. I think the reason that you're doing that is because ultimately, you know, it's more aligned. You know, it's a more aligned model. Sure. So, I mean, that's it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that agencies are bad.
Yeah. And I'm not saying agencies are bad either. And I feel like I do come off aggressively with be fair, those are the words that I'm using and the people that are seeing it, so I get it. Yeah. And I'm trying to get better at that as a person. I get it. Yeah. So I agree with you that I think ultimately there is a potential to outgrow that relationship, because an ad agency is a service business.
Yeah.
But some service businesses, like, the relationship can change, but I would push back and say, like, if your job, if you look at it as, you said, oh, I'm losing top line. And in that scenario, you're 100% right. But if we have 5 clients for $2,000 a piece, when we're starting off, right, and we're making $10K a month, first off, mazel tov to you if you're doing $10K a month. That's fantastic. You convinced 5 people to put the future of their dreams in your hands, and that's amazing. If you grow a couple of those to 5, 6, or 10,000, etc., and you lose one, looking back at it, you might lose that $10,000 a month client, but your net grew from 10,000 a month to like 50 or 60. So you lost a little bit, but also the quality of the relationship. And when you start somebody new, they don't necessarily start at the bottom. So,
I mean, there's all of that. There's all of that. Yeah. I'm just saying from the client perspective, it's like, you know, at some point in your future, it's probably going to make a lot of sense to not be working with your current agency anymore.
Sure. I would also say that, to play devil's advocate, I think we look at that from the perspective of people who are good at it. And
that's a great point, because you could hire a CMO, you know, for less than $500,000 a year, maybe, and they might not actually be good at it. Like I have this assumption that people know what they're doing all the time. You tweet a lot of things and that are like controversial, and I'll be like, hold on. And I'll like give you a scenario, and you'll be like, yeah, okay, fine. In that scenario, like, but that person has to understand like how to fit attribution into their brain. Right. And I'm like, oh, I just work from the standpoint of like all the high level people I know do understand that. You know what I mean? So that's a great point. I do have a tendency to assume that people like know what I know. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Yes.
Yeah. And to be fair, I'm going to give you a quote here. One of my favorite quotes that changed the way I think about the world. It was Hank Azaria on the Mark Maron WTF podcast. And he said, you know, I'm at the same time wildly overpaid and also criminally underpaid for my job.
Yeah.
And his point was, so Hank Azaria is one of the voices of The Simpsons. He's basically 1 out of 4 characters in the history of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Now, let's say for the purpose of this conversation, he's making $5 million a year, which is fantastic considering he spends about 2 weeks a year in a vocal booth, and he makes $5 million for 2 weeks. That is incredible.
Yeah. It's a good rate, good hourly rate.
Good rate. Yes. Solid. But he's 1/4 of the cast of $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between $5 million and $1 billion? It's
a lot.
about $1 billion. My point is
nearly $1 billion. Yes.
Yeah, very close. My point to that is, you said, "Oh, if I'm paying the CMO like 500 grand, I could hire somebody." Mm-hmm. But if we extrapolate that out, where let's say you brought in an agency in at $10,000 a month, and they increase their billings $2,000 a month, like 2,000 a quarter, whatever it happens to be. The amount of cycles and your growth that would take to get to that like $500,000 a year means that you as a business, and I've seen this happen. I've been a part of this so many times where I came into 310 Nutrition. They were doing like 18 million. Mm-hmm. 20 months later, we were doing 98.
Yeah.
Right? Like Under Outfit, right? It was $50K a month. Then it was $250 a month. Now it's $1 million a week. The point is, is that really, I guess
it makes sense. Go ahead.
It's just, is that really the problem you need to solve? Like, is bringing on an inside CMO to save money a good idea if that's not the problem you have?
So I would say, and so I really quick, I want to acknowledge the Twitter space. I saw that we have someone requested to speak. So we're doing a live recording of the of my podcast right now. So I'm going to try and get a clean recording, and then we'll maybe just do a couple minutes in the Twitter space.
Bring them in. Let's have some fun when we're done with this.
Yeah. So trying to get a clean recording. So sit tight for 1 second. If you're requesting to speak, we will bring you on after we're out on the pod. So yeah, but to your point, I think it's a good point, because essentially what you're saying is like, okay, I get that you're paying me $500,000-$600,000 a year now, but like your business does 50 million or 100 million a year. Like you really care, care that much about bringing me from 500,000 or 600,000 and saving, a couple 100,000 and doing 300,000. Like when we're the ones who've gotten you, like what if that's a detriment? What if that slows your growth curve, or what if that person, isn't aligned, whatever.
Yeah. The opportunity cost of saving 200 grand on a 9-figure business is
absolutely
a bad investment.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I think that there's another side of it too, that when a company grows to 100 million, an outsourced CMO, like they do get to a point where an outsourced CMO just doesn't really cut it anymore. Like somebody's got to be there. Somebody's got to breathe the business a little bit more. So again, I'm working from a space of like, assume it's one of your students. You know what I mean? Assume it's someone who's like, they're going to come in, they're going to know what they're doing. So assuming they can get that person who knows what they're doing, I think at a certain point, it's like, yeah, you need someone. It's not fully a money saving thing. It's like aligning somebody wholly to your incentives as a company and making that their main thing. I think in an ideal
something that you said earlier, that's probably where the equity deal comes into play, because now you're hiring a partner.
Yeah.
I mean, if the exit on that relationship when they graduate is now you have an equity piece in that business, and you as the agency owner are moving more into being an equity partner.
Yeah. So we've tried that. So that's because we thought that same thing. It's structured for a while where it's like, okay, once they get to a certain point and they're ready to go, like, why don't we just start to take equity pieces and stuff like that? And then like maybe work with them a little more closely. The problem is once they get to 50 or 100 million, they don't want to give up equity so easily anymore. Like they would have given you some equity when it was like $1 million. But it gets a little bit harder to get them to give up any equity piece at that point. So, and then even then you could try and buy in, but it's like, that's a much bigger, like you're talking about a whole different business model of like venture capital trying to buy $100 million businesses. So,
and to be fair, if you've raised somebody from 3 million to 50 million, like if you waited that long to buy into the equity, it's way more cost effective for them to never give you any.
Right. Yes.
Like you could have bet on yourself a little bit earlier, but that's always hindsight. Like there's no way to know that. Like I've been lucky in the equity deals where basically like that was on the table because of the relationship. Yeah. Where we said, hey, look, this doesn't make sense to do this monthly thing. And for what it's worth, most equity deals that I construct are based around as the equity vests. Yeah. The rate drops and an inverse relationship. So we're simpatico as it grows. We do have one person requesting to speak in Twitter Spaces. If you have any thoughts on this agency deal structuring, because I think we're kind of on the same page here where we're saying like,
yeah, okay, look, in terms of financial incentives, it doesn't fully align, right? But like there's ways to make it work a lot better and some ways that it doesn't work very well at all, right? So if anybody if anyone else has cracked this, I'd be very interested. And this is something that I've had endless conversations with Mr. Shackelford about, like how do we actually align, because it's like we want to do great work for our clients,
of course,
but the best way to grow our business is actually to do much more processized work for our clients that's going to give them, it's just not specific to them every time, right? So or to focus in on one thing, like, hey, let's get really efficient at running ad accounts but not really dig into their business, because it takes somebody with a brain to be able to dig into different businesses and understand like what's going to be the big growth levers here. So
and that's ultimately your business model, right? Like if you make the choice that we're going to handle accounts at scale, that could be one model. Your model might also be we're going to stay small and just buy into equity, where you're effectively a media buyer, rent to buy to VCs type of relationship. Like,
right?
I've seen those things work tremendously well. I think there's, and to be fair, what we're talking about is different ways to be successful and happy. And some of those bake in depreciation. Some of them bank on your hit rate's going to be low. But I think it's about risk diversification.
I think it clarified for me more when I stepped away from agency, or when, since I've parted ways with Structured, and it's like I'm doing more now of like, I'm only working with a couple brands as sort of like this fractional CMO. And for most of them, some form of equity is on the table, or some form of partnership with my own company that will mutually grow. Right. It's like, they're going to come on as, we're going to collab with them with one of our podcasts or something like that, and so there's going to be some kind of mutual growth there. And I think that's where it really like, okay, but the way that it's like very tight, and it's like the best way I've seen to grow an agency, if you want to grow an agency, is to go get more clients. And if you're not doing that, you are to some degree sacrificing your own business and your own like kind of growth and for something else. Whether that's your perceived like the quality of service you provide, which it's a noble thing, and it might make you happier to do better work for fewer clients. But like to some degree, you're like actually kind of acting in a way that's like counter to your financial incentives as a company.
Sure, but I would push back on that just 1 second, and I know we have people here, so we can go to them whenever you're ready.
I have a couple more things I want to hit on.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead.
I didn't want to like step on your toes and just keep people waiting, because I didn't want to be that guy. So about what you were saying, I don't disagree. I would say though that I know plenty of people that run businesses that have a lot of revenue that don't make much more money than when they were working a lot less. And the revenue of the business has nothing to do with the take home of the people that run the business. Like, I remember working at a company that I took to an 8-figure business, like 50 million plus, where my day job plus the little agency I started on the side at my desk, I took home more
from the agency with 3 clients. Yep. No, Shaq and I talked about this the last time he was on the podcast. There's a point with especially media buying agencies, and a lot of times they'll book time with me on Mentor Pass, and it's purely because I was at Structured, right? And they'll be like, "How did you do it? How did you grow Structured like this?" And I'll be like, I'll ask them a couple questions, and pretty quickly I'll be like, "Oh, okay. So you've got right now." They won't have told me any of this information. I'll be like, "Right now you have about 3 team members, right? And you got somewhere between 7 and 12 clients, between 3 team members." And they're like, yeah. How do I scale it? And I'm like, you're making more personal income now than you will like 4 or 5 times this size. And you're having more fun and you're doing better work. So step number 1, ask yourself if you want to scale it. And I think somebody in the chat just said, is moving up market not possible? I think it's a whole other well, right? Like it's based on an unproven premise that we can go get a completely different kind of client than we haven't gotten in the past. We don't even know where they hang out or how to talk to them yet if this is the kind of client that we've gotten, right? Especially if you already have 50, 60 mouths to feed in your agency. I do want to move on from this because I want to call out a couple tweets.
Let's do it.
That we're gonna maybe argue about or maybe not.
Oh, I love it. I feel like spicy meatballs are coming and I've got no pasta.
Yes, no pasta. Okay. Tweet number 1. Seeing a lot of really nice guys, quote unquote, running companies that an F ton. Sorry, I try not to swear, but you can swear.
I
it's
let
okay.
it slip once. I apologize.
It's okay if you swear. I just try not to. That a ton of harm that do a ton of harm to brands and the careers of marketers. They run agencies, have masterminds, etc. So curious, would you rather spend your time engaging with a nice guy with bad advice, an honest guy with great advice, an alpha male with bad advice, or dog shit advice? You know what I mean? So my first question is, there's a lot of smoke to some unnamed people there. Are you willing to call anybody out? It's okay. It's okay because at this point they've probably blocked you on Twitter anyway.
I mean, so maybe. Apparently, I've got that thing was going around about how many people have blocked you, and apparently I haven't seen a screenshot with more than me, so I guess I win. I don't know. No, I think I'll be honest. I feel like Twitter is its own universe, and there's the YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. But I think in person, these types of folks are the people in the business know who they are, and I don't feel like I don't want to go out there and hurt somebody in that way. I think if you had asked me 2 years ago, a year ago, I would have just rambled off a list
given the smoke
and thrown savage fire. But like, I'm trying to be a better person. Because ultimately I've also realized that like the more polarizing I can, there's a path of growth of polarization.
Yeah.
But in my ultimate goal of providing help and helping people see more success and creating more opportunity, if I put myself in a position where people aren't able to hear what I'm saying, then no matter how good my intentions are, I'm ultimately never going to get there. So what I will say is this. The people in the business know.
Well, let me ask you, do you think they do? Because I think sometimes people drink their own KoolAid.
Oh, sure. I think
they don't realize maybe that the advice that they're giving is like overgeneralized.
I legitimately don't think that the biggest offenders of this are aware of it.
I know. I think they just think that that's how it's done. And
they might think that's how it's done. They might think that what they're doing is good. And from their perspective, they're trying to be helpful, and that's great. I appreciate that.
And that's why you don't want to give them the smoke.
Well, because if somebody was out there being malicious, I think I'd have an opinion. And I think that the malicious folks that I've seen are the ones I don't talk to anymore because they flat out blocked me years ago, to be completely fair. And also, like, I don't think there's very many straight malicious folks in the business that are ultimately successful, because if you're at your core malicious in nature, you're never going to grow nearly the place of at your core being helpful. Whether or not your help is good or bad is a subjective view, but if you're a dick, you're not going to grow nearly as much as if you help people.
Interesting take from you.
Fair. I promise. Like it says on the thing, I'm a nice guy. It comes across aggressive just because. And I'll be fair. What spawned this like little string of tweets that I did?
Yeah,
was in about maybe a 10 to 12 day basis. I think I saw 15 new students in Disruptor School, or clients of students in Disruptor School, where the students like booked one-on-one consulting time with me. And, you know, I do that a lot, where we were literally just dissecting the same like 5 agencies. Like, and
I probably know who they are.
I guarantee that all of these are names you've heard of.
Yeah.
And or worked at. And to be fair, these are good people. Like,
yeah.
Like, I think there's just because somebody doesn't agree with you doesn't mean you have to demonize them either. Like you can really disagree with somebody about all this stuff and then go out for sushi and like be friends. That's fine.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're not going to give the smoke, then we can move on.
We can move on. Okay. I'll say this. I didn't take the bait. Let's try the next one.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get me by the end of this.
I'll say this about it. I think that to me, I don't really follow anyone that I feel that way about. The only person I would follow who I would say like, oh, I take issue with a lot of the things they say on Twitter is you. So
fair enough. I'll take it. I'm honored that of all that I hold that singular place, because I think that also means that you have I have a certain little place in your heart. And thank you for that.
Yeah, that you have a certain like way to make me just like distract my whole day to think of arguments to what you're saying.
I love it.
Here's one more tweet I want to hit on from you.
Okay.
Because here's one. I hard disagree here. And then right after this, we'll get into letting people who have requested to speak on Twitter Spaces speak. So then we can talk about all this stuff, as a group. We'll wrap up the pod and we can talk about all this stuff as a group.
Fantastic.
Here's the tweet.
Let's go.
And this is, I think you have a tendency to speak in absolutes when it's not an absolute. So here's the tweet.
Okay.
3 numbers that make your business worse.
Yeah.
When they go up.
Yep.
ROAS, click-through rate, number of creative tests.
Yeah. I've been asked about
before I rip it, explain yourself.
Yeah, I will stand by that because I can't really think of a situation where those don't hold true. So
holy crap. You can't think of a single situation where the ROAS goes up and the business doesn't get worse?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Like I've seen that so much.
Come on.
Okay. All right. I will say this. If you are a business that is not trying to grow, but is only trying to maximize efficiency and you have a singular marketing channel, in that case, which I can think of theoretically, but can't think of a single example of, then yes, that's a good thing. I would even say like the reason your ROAS goes up is really like one of 3 things. Number one, you're taking way less incremental revenue from your paid media. So you basically just have more maybe retargeting ads that are sharing credit for a sale with email campaigns and Google. So your ROAS goes up.
You're making so many assumptions about the reasons the ROAS is going.
Sure. I mean, I'm just giving one example.
Yeah. Okay.
Like maybe your ROAS is going up. I would say that's also maybe not good for your business in other places, because if you legitimately are making more money for your paid media efforts, and that is ultimately growing your business, and that is solid, and your objective is also growth, what you're telling me is I am proud of myself for collating untapped potential in a way where I'm missing the opportunity to take advantage of it. So that's a huge risk.
Yeah, so I can think of many situations where the ROAS has gone up and the business has been better because of it. Specifically, brands where a lot of the value is tied up in the first purchase, right? So just inherently, a lot of the value is tied up in the first purchase.
Sure.
Microphone that I use, right?
Sure.
Or like probably not going to buy another microphone from them. Or basically any kind of backyard game, crossnet, cornhole, those kinds of things. Lots of the value tied up in the first purchase. And typically what happens is the ROAS gets better and it's like, oh, we have more room for scale, and they scale into it, right? The ROAS getting better is just a signal that they have more room for scale, and then they scale into it. So yeah, I mean, I can think of a lot of situations where the ROAS goes up and the business gets better because of it. Furthermore, even if they don't scale into it, I think of a lot of situations where it's like we're literally selling out of all of our inventory all the time, right?
Yeah,
so
that's a huge problem. That's
the ROAS going up in that case until we get that problem fixed is making the business better because it's giving us more working capital.
Yeah, but in that use case, for instance,
that's a ton of use cases. That happens so much with growing
business. Sure, yeah, but that tells me you've got a tremendous business problem. And like what you've done is not only
the ROAS going up didn't make it worse. The ROAS going up didn't make it worse. You already had it.
Sure, but it highlighted it and it amplified the issue. Because now you're running out of inventory faster when so.
It's true. You should run worse ads and run out of inventory slower. It's a great point.
I'm not saying, well, also, I don't think ROAS has anything to do with the quality of the ads. That's also a complete myth, in my opinion, because let's break this down. What is ROAS? ROAS is AOV, which probably we can't control, divided by the attributed revenue from ad spend, which means ultimately you have to trust attribution and be able to track a customer journey. I can't tell you so there's a number you can't control divided by a number you can't trust gives you really, really bad information to take action on. So if you roll, let me ask you this.
So what you're saying is that it's not, so what you're saying is that ROAS is unrelated to business success.
Yeah.
So then how could ROAS going up make it worse if it's unrelated to business success?
Because often when your ROAS goes up, that cues poor decision making. And I can't tell you, like, so many businesses make poor decisions and compound the issues they have because they're looking at out of context metrics and definitions of success to make decisions. Like, if your ROAS is good on an ad, what are you going to do? Spend more money on it?
Potentially. Like, that would be I think that a lot of people have the maturity to know what ROAS is at this point, or what CPA, or how much they can trust any given metric in any given platform. Now, I mean, maybe not a few years ago, but now
I would think a few years ago had the same lack of validity.
Yeah,
I don't know that.
I bet, but we're not speaking about a few years ago. We're speaking about now. Now, I think a lot of people have enough maturity to know, like, just because any given platform, whether it's your attribution tool or the platform, the Facebook platform or whatever, says something does not mean it's true, right? And so proceed with caution no matter what. So most people are using true internal metrics like contribution margin or whatever, profitable scaling margin or something like that.
Sure.
So I would say that describes a lot of use cases now. I do want to move off of this topic a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
But one more thing. I think CTR is unrelated to business success. And so I don't think CTR going up can make your business worse.
I would disagree.
I think it's just unrelated.
I would disagree. And here's why. I was having this conversation with somebody today. Why does your CTR go up? Generally, your CTR goes up. You think it's because the ad's better. Generally, your CTR goes up because the denominator gets smaller. CTR is clicks divided by impressions. If your ad is good, your impression count, the denominator, will grow at a rate linearly faster than the numerator will. So a good ad that's good for your business will inherently have, depending on the business objective of that ad.
You believe it'll have a lower CTR because it'll reach more people who are less relevant.
Yeah, if my ad is good, I'm going to have a lower CPM because your cost of inventory is directly dependent on your relationship with the platform and meeting the business objectives. So if my CTR goes up because I have an ad that has a great ROAS, probably what's happening is I'm smashing my mid and bottom funnel in a way that is not sustainable, and I'll get a great ROAS to the point where I go out of business.
So yes. Okay. That's actually like a way better, I think, more defensible way to say it than what you have to realize.
Gotcha. Well, I have so many characters. Yeah.
But the main thing I disagree with, and I think the issue a lot of people have with you on Twitter, is the absolute. Like, in every circumstance, when the CTR goes up, the business gets worse, right? There's no way that that's absolutely true 100% of the time. Like,
sure.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
if we're saying there's no absolutes,
but it's not like on Twitter. What are you going to say? Like, most of the time, you know what I mean? I get it.
I don't have 4,000 characters. Nobody reads the threads I put out anyway.
Right,
so like, if I can get, like, the honest truth is, and I'll be completely like open kimono about this. What that does is that's inspiring a conversation for somebody to think about something in a way. And the reactions and the conversation that come off of that, I think, are incredibly important. Because, like, for instance, if I didn't tweet that, we wouldn't have this conversation. We wouldn't put those things into context. You might still have people thinking that a really good ROAS and a really good CTR is great when they're chasing that and they ultimately go out of business because they don't have any more revenue.
Well, yeah, I mean, so what you brought up with CTR, it's important. Like, if you care about CTR, which I think most people just don't. And
I would say, by the way, this is on Facebook CTR, not so it's in. It's in the Google economy of attention, not supply and demand economy of like display.
In Google, CTR is like a positive.
Totally. And I want to preface that because I'm not sitting here saying that this is true for email or like Google. Right? Like those things, CTR is good.
But it's a good point to say that if you were paying attention to CTR, which I just happen to think most people aren't, but if you were, like, look at your frequency, right? Because maybe it's good because your denominator is small and it's just not getting served to more people, which doesn't mean it's a good ad. It doesn't mean you can scale that ad. It's a great point, actually. And I'm glad. So yes, to your point, I'm glad you tweet the controversial things that I argue with in my brain.
We can have a conversation so that we can have a conversation. People can challenge the status quo that they've been taught in a way that makes them better. That's great. And to be fair, I've had my mind changed about a lot of things because of the conversations that have been inspired.
Like what? I have never.
I mean, I used to think that, like, I mean, this goes back to probably more offline stuff than things that happen on Twitter, because I came to Twitter more of a fully developed, like having a fully developed opinion about stuff.
Yeah.
But if you were to be a fly on the wall for me and Marina Randolph, the former VP of Guthrie Ranker, who was my boss at 310 Nutrition, we would argue for hours in the morning and then go out for sushi about stuff where I was wrong probably 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And like one of the biggest things that I did was I'd make like a Facebook report. I'd make a paid media report with all paid channels where I was defining success as ROAS, for instance. And if you really want to get at me about ROAS not being right, well, like Marina has a lot to do with me being a better marketer than that. And for instance, I just posted this picture of me on Snapchat headquarters where like I was dropping 6 figures a month. And I legit got emotional and was written up by Marina on a day that nobody wanted to have a conversation because it was wasting $1 million on Snap ads because of the metrics that people think are important.
Right. No, I mean, look, it's so we have a tradition on the Modern Commerce podcast of closing out with what we call a parting shot. Okay. And I've got it today. I'll take it today. Casey, give me in full screen on the on the thing. There we go. All right. So my parting shot today, if you take one thing away from this, the biggest thing I would say that you can take away here is debate and disagreement is healthy, right? So as long as everybody is coming from a place of good intention and everybody is just trying to win and win together. You know, one of my favorite people, the people who listens to this podcast says, you know, there's enough for everybody to eat. And that's just the truth, right? So if you disagree, if you're debating, if you're just, you know, arguing with somebody, as long as you guys are both coming from a place of good intention and trying to, you know, help the industry, trying to help yourselves, trying to learn, I think debate is a healthy thing. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I love it and I'll agree with it. And what I will say is I love that you and I can have these types of conversations. Yeah. There's a lot of other people that I have these conversations with. And I want more of this engagement because the honest truth is neither of us learn anything from being told that we're right.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, I appreciate you being on the podcast. Everybody, if you're on YouTube, you can check out. I linked his channel up in the description. It's CT Disruptor on YouTube. He's got a pretty good YouTube channel. It's all right. It's pretty good, I guess.
Thanks, no, man. Hey, look, you know, I'm doing a thing.
I was like, yeah, he's doing some stuff over there.
Check it out. You know, yeah, it's helpful if you want to learn how to do digital marketing.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I should pitch it a little bit better.
Oh, thanks. You know, it's all credit due to Dara Denny. She gave me her editor, and I exploded afterwards. So
I know. I met that dude. He seems pretty legit.
Miguel is legit. If you want a video editor, I'll give you his information. Like, I don't make anything off of it, but he's a dude that's doing really good work.
Yeah,
and he can handle more bandwidth. So I can only shoot so many videos a week.
Definitely check out Charlie's YouTube channel. And here's what I'll say about the Disruptor School. I think that what you're trying to do, you're trying to put a good product out into the world. My disclaimer for Disruptor School, before you just go and buy in and become a Disruptor School student, consume Charlie's content somewhere.
Totally.
Because if you go in not having known and not really knowing what you're stepping into, it's going to feel like a minefield.
Yeah, I will 100% agree with that. And I don't want your money right away. Absorb all the free stuff. Like I would say personally, my goal is to have my free stuff be competitive with what most people are charging for. And when you're ready for more, you can come to me for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything should be linked up in the description of the podcast app or the Spotify or the whatever you're listening on or watching on. If you are on one of the audio apps, please rate and review. That's very, very helpful for us. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we go live and have discussions like this. Charlie, it's been good having you. Really enjoyed it. We'll sign off on the podcast now and we'll head over to the Twitter live.
Thanks.